In Path of Exile's Conquerors of the Atlas expansion, map progression in Path of Exile changed dramatically. In this in-depth guide, I will break down 4 easy steps for you to follow to progress quickly and efficiently through the Atlas. Welcome! It's your friendly neighborhood Badger here, and I am back for the first of my game mechanic videos, explaining the in-depth mechanics of Path of Exile. Today, we will be tackling the Atlas, specifically the Conquerors of the Atlas expansion Atlas, complete with Conqueror influence and watchstones. To many players, the progression of this endgame content can seem entirely frustrating, confusing, or just plain slow, but there are many big specific tips to keep in mind as you grind your way through maps. This guide works for all league types, including solo self-found, as there will be no use of the Path of Exile trade website or any other proprietary website such as PoEmap.live. Disclaimer: this video was created during the 3.10 update to Path of Exile, so if you're watching this at a later date, things are subject to change. However, this should be mostly valid for the entirety of the Conquerors of the Atlas expansion. To summarize, I will break this guide down into 4 easy to follow steps that are scalable, repeatable, and followable. There is a handy color guide below to jump to where you need to jump to. Section 1. How maps drop. Section 2. How Atlas completion works. Section 3. Conqueror and Watchstone Progression. And Section 4. Using game mechanics to drop extra maps. In Path of Exile, maps will start to drop in any zone level 55 and above, which coincides with the level in the first zone of Act 8. Any maps you will drop during the leveling process will be Tier 1, the lowest tier in endgame map progression. Maps in Path of Exile scale all the way from Tier 1 through to Tier 16, starting at zone level 68 and finishing at a zone level of 83. Understanding how maps drop is essential in progressing through the Atlas smoothly, so we will start with some general information. Here is the Atlas. This is Path of Exile's endgame encounter map, and serves as a guideline to your progression through the endgame. But knowing how to read this map is very important, otherwise you won't know where you are going and will wander around aimlessly. As stated before, you may encounter some map drops before you reach the endgame in Path of Exile, and these will be at Tier 1. For the purpose of this video, I will explain using a Tier 1 map. As you first run a Tier 1 map, you will have the chance to drop additional maps within that zone. These maps are based on a specific set of rules. Firstly, any normal or white enemies in the zone can only drop maps of the same tier or below, so in this case only Tier 1 maps. Any magic or rare, or blue and yellow enemies can drop maps 1 tier higher or below, so in this case Tier 2. And lastly, unique or orange enemies can drop maps to a maximum equal to 2 tiers above, which in this case is Tier 3. Starting out, the maps you are able to drop are from a very select pool, maps you have previously completed or maps that are directly adjacent to the map you are running. For example, this Tier 1 pier map, when starting out, if no other maps are completed, can only drop Villa, Peninsula, and Haunted Mansion maps. As you progress into higher tier maps through this method, pay attention to which maps are missing. You may want to run certain maps to try to drop connected maps if you're stuck, but we will talk about this later. When reaching much higher tiers of maps, your progression will slow down. This is a natural progression because, as stated before, maps can drop any map of the appropriate tier or any map lower. What this does mean is that, for example, you run a Tier 11 map, this map can drop any map below that tier, meaning you have a lower chance of obtaining maps of an appropriate tier to progress higher into the Atlas. However, one good thing to note is that according to RizGGG from a Reddit post on March 5th, 2019, there is a 2 times weighting for incomplete maps to drop, and a 4 times weighting for adjacent maps, multiplicative. What this means is that you have a higher chance for both dropping incomplete maps and adjacent maps, as drops will favor these. In this section, we will talk about how to progressively complete your atlas in order for higher tier maps to drop efficiently and in return to drop higher level loot, and much more of it. In most cases, progressing your atlas is the right thing to do. There are specific techniques in completing only certain parts of the atlas, but we won't talk about that here because it is incredibly niche. As you progress, each map has 3 types of completion objectives. First, completing any map, which requires the defeating of the boss or bosses in the zone, gives you a completed map on your atlas, allowing this map from then on to be able to have a chance of dropping when running any other map of the same tier or higher. The second completion is the bonus completion, in which the map has to be completed at a certain rarity. For white maps, tier 1 to 5, they are to be completed at a magic level or higher, so this can easily be done by using an orb of transmutation on the map. For yellow maps, tier 6 to 10, these must be completed at a rare level or higher, so using an orb of alchemy. For any red map of tier 11 and above, these maps must both be completed in a rare and corrupted state, by using an orb of alchemy and then a Vaal orb. Keep in mind that when corrupting a map, it has a chance to become other maps or roll unpredictable modifiers that your build may not be able to handle. Always check your maps thoroughly after corrupting them. The third type of completion is Awakening bonus. Awakening bonuses are extra bonuses based on dropping higher tier maps of the same map, only able to be obtained through the use of watchstones, which leads into a perfect segue into the next section. Now, exiles, brace yourselves. This section is by far the longest and most intricate section of them all, so pay close attention. Are we ready? Good. Watchstones are socketable drops that can be used to increase the level of maps in each of the 8 regions of the Atlas. Watchstones are obtained from defeating one of the 4 Conquerors at specific levels, which will be talked about in depth soon. As you can see by demonstration, when socketing a watchstone in a zone, it increases the level of each of the maps in that zone by a certain amount. With 0 watchstones socketed, inside areas of the Atlas, Turn's End, Lex Proxima, Glennock Cairns, and Valdo's Rest, spanned from tier 1 to 4, and outside areas, Haywark Hamlet, Lex Ajoris, New Vestia, and Lyra Arthane, are tier 3 to 5. As you socket 1, 2, 3, or 4 watchstones in each area, the tiers of maps will increase, as well as extra maps will start appearing on the Atlas. For every 4 watchstones on the Atlas, your awakening level increases, which is signified by the number in the center of the Atlas. On each level of awakening, special perks are added to your maps, increasing both the drop chance of maps and loot. This should incentivize you to increase your awakening level as soon as possible, as it both helps your map sustain and increases your sweet currency gain. Knowing how, where, and when to socket your watchstones is one of the most difficult things to explain and learn, but luckily Badger is here to break down how best to effectively go about this process. Let's start with a basic atlas. I have most maps completed in mine and all watchstones collected, but I will explain the process in which I managed to complete most of my atlas and reach Cirrus, the final atlas boss, in day 2 of Delirium League. When first starting out, the best way to complete your maps is to just basically run everything you have, always running the highest map that drops, prioritizing uncompleted maps. Try to complete at least 80 to 90% of the base atlas, which is Awakening Level 0 all white maps, before even thinking about socketing in watchstones. This is to create a very strong base of completed maps that will have a chance of dropping at higher tiers once watchstones start getting socketed. During this process, you will undoubtedly come across Conqueror citadels, which will be portals at the end of maps after defeating the boss, in which you will enter and be greeted by Zana at a watchstone altar. After this point, Conqueror influence can be applied to zones through general running of maps by the changing of colour in a zone that corresponds to each specific Conqueror. Green for Alhesmin, red for Baran, blue for Veritania, and yellow for Drox. As you spawn Conqueror Influence, bars will appear on the side to show you how many maps you must run in this zone for the Conqueror to spawn, in which you will then talk to Kirak, allowing you to open a portal to the Conqueror's Citadel. When defeating that Conqueror, you will receive a Conqueror's Watchstone that corresponds both to the Conqueror you defeated and the zone you defeated them in. This next part is vitally important to be mindful of. Once you defeat a Conqueror in a specific area on the Atlas, you can never receive a Watchstone from them again within that zone. For example, if my first Conqueror spawn of Al-Hezmin, which is green, was within turn's end and I collected the Watchstone, if I then spawn Al-Hezmin again on turn's end, he will no longer drop a Watchstone, regardless of the tier of map or awakening level. You can keep track of this progress over to the side on each of the 8 sections and their slots for their Watchstones. Hovering over each area will tell you whether you have obtained the Watchstone from specific Conquerors in that area, and will also tell you the requirements to obtain other Watchstones in that area, so make sure on completing each rotation of 4 Conquerors, you spawn their influence on different areas. But how does influence spawn? Well, as of patch 3.10, Conqueror Influence has a 50% chance each map of spawning initially in any given zone. Once completing and defeating the Conqueror for this influence, they cannot spawn again until all other Conquerors are spawned and defeated. For each Conqueror spawn, the requirements for the next obtainable Watchstone are increased. For the first Watchstone, no requirements are to be met. For the second, the Conqueror must be spawned on a different area with at least 1 Watchstone socketed. For the third, 2 Watchstones must be socketed. For the fourth, 3 Watchstones must be socketed, and lastly for the fifth, a total of 4 Watchstones must be socketed. This can seem like an extremely daunting task, juggling the position of Watchstones, your map pool, and the specific positioning of Conqueror spawns. So here is one way to progress while spawning Conquerors effectively in each zone. I will coin this technique the quadrant technique. This relies on focusing on a specific quadrant for each Conqueror spawn, while preparing other quadrants to drop maps. Starting out, as stated before, you want to just blindly run your maps until 80 to 90% of your base atlas is completed. The more maps you complete, the easier this technique will become. During this process, you will also start to spawn all 8 Watchstone altars, and then you'll begin to naturally start spawning Conqueror Influence, starting on the outer 4 regions of the Atlas. Once these Conquerors spawn, if you have not completed 80 to 90% of your Atlas or have not spawned all 8 Watchstone altars, focus on those maps first, and then divide your Atlas into 4 quadrants, with each quadrant containing 1 inside region and 1 outside region. The mental task of doing this will make your progression extremely easier than without doing so, as you will see very soon. Once you defeat your first Conqueror on an outside region, you will receive your first Watchstone. Immediately on receiving this Watchstone, you want to socket it into the corresponding inside region in that quadrant. For example, if you complete your first Conqueror and obtain its orb from the Haywalk Hamlet, you will then immediately socket that Watchstone into Turn's End, the corresponding inside region. Then, you will focus on a different quadrant, and for the sake of ease, we will rotate clockwise, spawning and defeating the Conqueror in Lex Ajuris and socketing the Watchstone into Lex Proxima, thus repeating the cycle for Lyra Arthane and New Vastir. To explain why this works efficiently, we have to harken back to how maps drop. If we socket our Watchstones immediately into the next area inside, during all of our other Conqueror spawns and maps running, we will have the chance to drop higher tier maps needed to complete the inner regions with 1 Watchstone socketed. Working in an orderly clockwise fashion, we effectively spread out, allowing for an even distribution of drops between each zone. Once each of the 4 Conquerors have been defeated in their outer regions, you should naturally have found you now have plenty of maps to start your cycle again, starting at Turn's End with tier 4 to 7 maps in that region. The second part is vitally important as well. Once completing first spawn of the second round of Influence and Conqueror spawns and dropping your second watchstone in that region, you want to remove the first watchstone from the first zone, in this case Turn's End, and socket both the watchstone you removed and the latest watchstone you received into the corresponding outside part of the quadrant. Again, this now means that while you are running your other inner sections of the watchstone zones, you will build up a map pool in the two socketed watchstone outer tiers of tier 8 to 11. This ping-pong effect of inside-outside socketing of watchstones is by far the most effective way of building an atlas quickly and spawning conquerors efficiently. And the rotation either clockwise or anti-clockwise, not skipping to opposite quadrants, is very important as well, as your biggest friend during map progression is diversity of maps. Once completing your second round of conquerors, you run the third in two watchstone outer regions, and again receiving the watchstone and removing all from the zone you just ran into the corresponding inner region. Rotate, complete, and run. This method will allow you to receive 20 watchstones quickly and effectively, and once these watchstones have all been gathered, you will be ready to fight Cirrus, the endgame encounter of the Atlas. Congratulations! Progression from this point to make your way through to Awaken a level 8 or 32 watchstones is just a matter of inspecting the left hand side of your atlas to see what areas you need to receive the remaining 12 watchstones from, and running maps accordingly. By this point, you should have a very strong map pool. Each 4 Conqueror spawns from this point on, you will have another chance at fighting Cirrus. Keep in mind that his difficulty scales directly with your Awakener level. If you want to try and learn the fight, I suggest unsocketing all watchstones for a base Awakener level 0 Cirrus fight. During this process of completing your atlas, no doubt you will run into issues of map sustain. This is quite prevalent in the 3.10 patch of Path of Exile and may change in future patches, but it's handy to know of all the ways to drop extra maps. First of all, the most basic and straightforward way to drop maps is through the crafting of maps. Map drops are directly affected by the quantity on a map, affected by modifiers caused by transmuting or alching a map, using an alchemy orb. The higher the quantity, the more chance you have to spawn maps. Got 80% quantity on a map? Great! You now have 80% more chance to drop a map than if you ran that map at a normal state, or not affected by any modifiers. Using your currency early league to roll your maps with high quantity is very helpful, as you will regain that currency extremely quickly if you are fast into high tier maps. How about some other techniques? During your mapping, you may also drop sacrifice fragments. These fragments have two great functions for helping spawn more maps. Firstly, for earlier tier maps, you can actually put these fragments as singular items into your map device and run corrupted Vaal side area maps from your hideout, and these have a chance to drop maps corresponding to the level of the zone or lower. However, you can also put these fragments into the map device along with a standard map to increase the quantity. For each different sacrifice fragment supplementing the map, you receive a bonus of 5% quantity in that map. Zana is also an extremely helpful NPC in a couple of different ways. Zana can sell you maps from her shop, and it is vital you check the shop every chance you can, but it has a cooldown of around about 24 hours, and will only restock each time you encounter Zana in a map and complete her bonus objective. Granted, that's outside the 24-hour cooldown period. You can also gain missions from Zana that you can run from clicking on her and selecting Atlas Mission at the top and putting your map in there. This will guarantee a Zana spawn in the map. As of a patch coming out very soon at the time of recording, this can also be done from the map device itself. Other masters have chances to drop maps in their mechanics. Alva can create a map room in the temple, allowing for great map drops. Jun has a chance for Syndicate members to drop maps on interrogation or release. Einhar just adds more rare monsters to a map, increasing the chance of dropping them. Even delving through Nico can net you some great map sustain. All of these techniques can be used together to make your map progression extremely smooth, and you should have absolutely no problem completing your entire atlas solo when following these guidelines. And that's about it, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Comment below if this helped you in any way and what you learned. I would love to hear from you. Also, if you think I missed anything, don't hesitate to let me know. If you do like this new type of game mechanic content, hit that subscribe button and turn on bell notifications. You'll get notified whenever I release a new game mechanic video. Also, due to the mandatory shutdowns of all non-essential businesses in Australia as of very recently, I have lost my full-time job, so if you want to help out in any other way, I do have a Patreon just below. There are great perks, and just for the price of a coffee a month, you can support me and help me create even more content for you exiles in the very near future. That's it from me. Until next time, Badger out. Boom!
Fucking sellout.